We turn to our panelists, Steve Schmidt, an MSNBC analyst and former Republican strategist, Neera Tanden, president of the Center for American Progress, a former policy director to Hillary Clinton, and The Root's Jason Johnson, an MSNBC analyst as well. Now, we're about to hear our panel's rebuttals to Steve Bannon tonight. Here are briefly just a few of the aggressive claims he made today about his approach to these midterms.
I think the Democrats, and particularly the grassroots Democrats, are running as an impeachment campaign. I think our side has to understand that. You just can't run on tax cuts. I fought for a 44% tax for people making over $5 million. I lost that fight.
The question is Donald Trump walking away and walking the GOP away from these women voters?
He's definitely not walking away. I'm not 100% with the Time's Up movement, but I can see it's a very powerful political force. The opposition party media and the Democrats did succeed in one thing. I think they did get a do-over to 2016, and I think this is his first reelection. Trump is is at war with the permanent political class, the opposition party media, and basically, he's at economic war with China.
Neera.
Look, I think this interview demonstrates that Bannon is and always has been basically a charlatan. I mean, it's hard to know where to begin, but let me just make a few points. First, on the tax cut. Donald Trump and Steve Bannon acted as if they were champions of the working class. With this tax cut and this economy, wages for working class people of all kinds, but even white working class people, have stayed stagnant or fallen behind. The tax cut is going, as you noted, to the 81%. 81% is going to the top 1%. But wages are falling behind even with this trade war. The whole idea that Donald Trump is some kind of president of the working class is a joke. And then let me just say, on the whole issue of Time's Up, I might agree with him in the power of the Time's Up movement, but frankly, the idea that you can talk about the Time's Up movement in any positive term and then support Donald Trump, who was credibly accused by 16 women, and Roy Moore, who was accused of basically pedophilia, demonstrates that he's just not, he's a charlatan, but he's like out of the mainstream of everything that should be considered reasonable in American politics.
Anytime that you talk about Steve Bannon, it's important to mention that he is a white nationalist and a terrorist sympathizer. The alt-right are terrorist sympathizers. He is not a believer in American democracy. He is a believer in Alexander Dugin. And these are important things to mention because every single shenanigans and nonsense that he spouts about government and elections, these are not things he believes in. These are things that he performs on television in order to make people not realize that he is a terrorist sympathizer. So beyond that, the core of what he was saying is nonsense. This stuff about Me Too, I believe in the patriarchy because of my daughter, he sounds like a pimp saying, hey, I got a great plan for you to pay for your college tuition, okay? You can't support Roy Moore. You can't support Donald Trump and that you support women. You can't say that you support overall democracy and dismiss the fact that you only got 3% of African-American women to vote for you. You can't say that you're concerned about crony capitalism and then take all of your money from Wall Street and then deny it. You can't say, I won't take foreign funds and then crisscross across Europe and the UK and Italy, constantly getting material support from other right-wing fascist sympathizing groups abroad. He is a charlatan, to use your word, and a terrorist sympathizer, and he is a danger to the American public.
Steve Schmidt.
Well, I'm gonna start out by agreeing with something that Steve Bannon said that he's exactly right on, is that this midterm election, which I believe is the most important midterm election in American history, it is a referendum on Donald Trump. The country is either going to repudiate Trumpism or it will embrace it. As a business proposition, what Steve Bannon is saying correctly is that if the election were tomorrow, you could see losses in the Republican House of 25, 30, as high as 40, 45 seats. And basically what he's going out there and doing is fleecing donors and say, but if you give me money, I can arrest this trend. I will be able to make this race something other than a referendum about Donald Trump. I'll be able to put it back on the Democrats. Of course, that's not going to happen, but I suspect he'll raise some money over it. What's true about the tax cut is it added $1 trillion to the national debt, and it did nothing to lift wages of income for working people in this country. And lastly, this idea that there is a resurgence because of the tax cut of manufacturing jobs flooding back into the country is preposterous and nonsensical. And then lastly, let me just say, the idea that he said with a straight face and with conviction that we should be at economic war with China, that his mercantilist policy, his advocacy for these tariffs against a country that holds trillions of dollars of our debt and our paper in an integrated global economy is just complete and total crackpottery. It's terrible for the American consumer. It's even worse for the American working person, and it's just completely outside the economic and political mainstream, and it's going to do a lot of damage over the next years to a lot of people, including in the places where Trump won, and in no small measure in places like Fayette County, Iowa, where soybean farmers will be decimated as they lose their markets because of this inept policy.
Neera, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, look, I agree with what Steve's saying about the people that are going to be hurt by his policies. And I think the reality is that Donald Trump claimed to speak for a whole number of people who were struggling in the economy. And those people are struggling, if not the same, much more under Donald Trump's policies. The farmers that are being hurt by trade, the people in factories who are being hurt by his trade policies, as well as just overall, the tax cut was a giant bait and switch, the kind of giant bait and switch that Donald Trump's rhetoric would have attacked. It was something that really helped Wall Street CEOs and the bottom line of companies and really hurt working people, which is the kind of rhetoric that Bannon used to attack during the swamp. That's why I think Bannon really demonstrates this is all just a fraud. It is an effort just to raise money.
So Neera calls it a fraud, Jason. Is there an avenue here for the people who oppose Bannon to make the argument that you can expose that all the things that are around the middle class don't seem to get done? He also told me he didn't get the infrastructure bill. He didn't get the real Glass-Steagall breakup of the banks, and he says he's mad that it didn't happen. Meanwhile, the tax cuts is the one thing that did happen.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have a record of accomplishment, and neither does his president. And that's why his sort of economic pablum is so disingenuous. You've got a guy, you know, he's the guy who like won one Super Bowl 5 years ago and is still playing off of it. All right, so you got Donald Trump in office. You ran against one of the least popular Democrats in history. Yay, you can be proud of yourself. You can pat yourself on the back. But basically, he hasn't demonstrated a lot of political skills since then. He doesn't have the rhetorical skills to justify the economic policies that have consistently failed people. And so he wants to dance around the country and pretend that he can trick Republicans into following him down another pit where they will lose this fall. Nobody should listen to him, whether it's economic policy or even campaign policy past 2016.
The panel stays with me. What we're going to do next is get into some real revelations, because Steve Bannon talks to me about the, quote, treasonous Trump Tower meeting, the Russians, and his meetings with Mueller.